Okay, hi guys. So I'm working on the wing of the C47D, and people have asked me before, how do you mount the servos in the wing? And so I wanted to show how I do it on. I don't do this on all models, but I'm doing it on this model. It's a larger model, and it's it's not one I'm trying to build as light as possible. I mean, I always try and build light as possible, but this one's not going to be a light airplane. So to mount the servos, I'm going to mount one for each aileron in each wing panel. And so I've cut a piece of plywood that's going to be removable for where my servo mounts, and that way I can cover up to the plywood area on the wing, and then this will just mount the servo in the wing, give me easy access to it with just one or two screws to hold it in place. So I've cut a piece of plywood. I've marked out where I plan to mount the servo, and cut out an opening for the control horn, the servo control horn. And then I've cut a couple of these angled wedges of balsa wood. And when you do a wedge like this, make sure that the grain is parallel to the hypotenuse of the triangle, that longer side of the triangle. That's where you get the most strength if you make them this way. Otherwise, you have the grain can break easily. This way, it's glued to the plywood on this surface. And I've also glued thin plywood to the servo mounting surface, and then drilled a couple holes for the screws to mount the servo. So these little plywood wedges then we'll just glue onto the plywood plate. And I've done another one for the other side. I've cut a relief area here for the servo wires. And I've also put a dowel peg in, and that's going to mount one side of this into the wing, and then the other side will just screw in. So what I've done is I've kind of reinforced this area and made more gluing surface for the cap strips and things where the servo is going to go, and also an area where it can sit down against the edge of the plywood, can sit down against there. So eventually then there's a piece of plywood in the front and a piece of plywood glued to the back side where that thin plywood cover with the servo will go in. Then the peg just goes into this hole right here. So then you can slide it in there, and then one or two screws can hold it down in place. So I've got this cut, all these parts cut and arranged, so let's get those glued on here. So I'm going to use Type Bond 3 glue. I can put the servo in place too, just to make sure it's mounted in the center of that slotted area. There we go, like that. And let's glue the other one on. So just glue it just like that. Okay, we'll let that dry, and then I'll come back and install that into the wing and make the holes for the screws and things. Got the servo screwed on to the plywood plate. Got our braces glued on. So now we just insert the wire through the hole in the ribs and put this peg in the hole in the front. Slide it forward, push it down in, and there we go. We've got it flush with the trailing edge sheeting. We'll when we put the leading edge sheeting on, we'll match that up. Right now I want to drill holes, 2 holes for a couple of screws to hold this plate down in the back. So we're just drilling into through the plywood and into the plywood that's below. Drill 1 hole there and a hole here also. Okay. Just have some small screws to see. I think I'll drill the top plywood plate a little larger so we have maybe some clearance. Let's see, maybe go one bigger than that. Set this, yeah, about that size. So I'm just going to drill these holes out, clearance them for the screws. But I think I'll go one size smaller. That's a little larger for this size. Now we'll put the screws in. Once we cover the wing, we can cover this little plywood section with the servo separately or individually, and then all the covering will match the wing covering. So this way we can still have access to the servo, but yet it's flush or mounted mostly internally inside the wing. It just makes a nice neat installation, and still gives you access to the servo if it needs maintenance or anything. So there we go. That's how you do it. And like I said, I don't always mount them this way. If it's just a flying wing and I'm trying to make it as light as possible, then I may just mount the servo permanently in the wing and just call it good. And if something happens to it, I have to, you know, cut the covering or somehow get to it inside. Usually don't worry about it too much. The wings maybe don't last as long as the servo will. So, all right. Anyway, please like and subscribe to my videos, and thank you very much.